What's good, Atlanta? This is the Blog and Dirty podcast, where Dirty Bird is the word if you haven't heard. I'm your host, John Buhler, staff writer, fansided.com. One more game left of the regular season. Hopefully, we've got a little bit more football left to be played beyond this Sunday. The Atlanta Falcons are 8-8 heading into their final game of the season versus the Carolina Panthers. Carolina Panthers Part 2. Because Atlanta lost to Washington, we really need the Buccaneers to lose to be able to get into the playoffs. But Carolina has been the worst team in the division. But more importantly, this is a division game. And you and I and everybody else who follows along to the NFC South knows exactly what that means and what this division entails. So, yeah, we're going to have a fun episode here today. Probably a little brief, got some stuff going on here. Obviously, the holiday season, this is why I'm going live on a Friday as opposed to my normal time on a Wednesday. But we'll have a show today. Have a special guest on the next two episodes. Going to be bringing on Ian McMillan of Sports Illustrated to kind of do, either playoff preview or postmortem. And then I'll have my false start co-host, my fanside.com colleague, and my partner in crime there, with everything to do with false start. Cody Williams will be on, talking Falcons, Cowboys, whatever we want to do. I just want to start talking to some people again. It's New Year, same me, and this is the Blog Nerdy podcast. So let's start with the first topic today. Let's go with vibe check. How are we feeling about the Atlanta Falcons heading into the final week of the season? It's a little bit of a mixed bag, I would say. There's a lot of talent on this team. We see the pieces, but they're not always fitting. I don't think anybody's really overly critical of the roster right now. Maybe a little bit of the general manager and definitely the coaching staff. I think we have the talent. We have seen the talent here in Atlanta to play up with the standard of any of the best teams in the NFL this season. I think that Atlanta's had a very tough schedule, not a lot of easy breaks. Got a little bit of a respite there versus the Giants and Raiders, but it's been a slog, man. Like every team that we thought wasn't going to be good ended up being pretty good. I mean, you looked at the season, you're like, okay, the Broncos and the Chargers may not be that good, or the Vikings, maybe the Commanders, Seahawks. They've all playoff caliber teams. I mean, Seahawks are kind of in the boat with us. We're like, I think that they're mathematically eliminated, but we're going to probably play them next year as part of, competitive balance. I think at this point, the Falcons are locked into either a first or second place schedule. So you're looking at playing teams like the Rams and the Seahawks out of the NFC West, the Lions and the Vikings out of the NFC North, and then the Eagles and the Commanders out of the NFC East. I cannot recall what division we pull out of in the NFC or in the AFC next year. I know we put AFC West in its entirety this year. Maybe we're due for like the AFC East or the AFC South. I feel like it's been a while since we played one of them. So maybe we'll get some help there with our schedule. But, you got to try to be positive here. It's a new year. It's the second. We're going to have to see the second career start for Michael Penix Jr. here in Atlanta. It's going to be the second year under Raheem Morris, with Zach Robinson calling plays. We'll see what happens with Jimmy Lake. I think there's other high-quality defensive minds that will be available with Atlanta ties. Looks like that Doug Peterson's probably going to be out in Jacksonville. That leaves Ryan Nielsen available, and he was great last year here as a DC. And then the guy who was the defensive coordinator under Raheem Morris as the interim, Jeff Ulbrich, he's the interim coach at the Jets. I think he's a future head coach in the NFL, maybe needs a little more time and grooming, but those are two guys that I think could potentially come to Atlanta staff and really help solidify the defense. Again, this team's really close. So even after the Sunday Night Football thriller losing to Washington in overtime, it's bittersweet. We saw Penix play up to the standard we thought that he could be as a number 8 pick. You wonder how Cousins would have done, in another homecoming. He went back to Minnesota and threw up all over himself. He's played pretty well, in prime time of late. Maybe he would have been more fired up versus the Commanders. But again, I really need to see Raheem Morris improve as a head coach. It just seems like every time he's going up to somebody his equal or better, he can't beat him. And but the good news is, as is the case with any NFL season, there's going to be multiple openings. Right now, there's 3. Chicago's moved on for Matt Eberflus. The Jets moved on for Robert Saleh. and the New Orleans Saints move on from Dennis Allen. Those are three jobs that are going to be opening up. We venture to guess that Jacksonville will probably become available as well. Probably the New York Giants. Looking across the board, usually we're anywhere between 5, maybe even 10 head coaches that have new vacancies that open up. But in that situation, the more stable organizations tend to do better. I mean, you look at the Steelers; they've had Tomlin there forever. Andy Reid's been in Kansas City for almost a decade. There will probably be a surprise termination out there, but I don't think Morris is really the problem as much as everybody says he is. Likeable guy, really good defensive mind. I think it's just a period of adjustment, as a CEO type. And I think more importantly, it's an elevated role for other guys on his staff. I mean, particularly Zach Robinson, first-time play caller, is trying to figure out the vibes of his offense here. I think he'll be great next year. That's what we saw out of Kyle Shanahan here in year 2. Obviously, that's the gold standard for what we want, but the offense tends to get better. Whether it's the second year under Sarkisian, Dirk Cutter, Mike Mularkey, you name it, guys that have been OCs here for a very long time. Maybe not even the guy. I forgot his name. The OC under Arthur Smith. It didn't really matter. It was Arthur Smith, so who cares? But as long as the coaching staff improves and we make some key picks in the draft, maybe a few calibrations to the roster in free agency, you can afford to let Kirk Cousins walk. You got to find a backup quarterback here to bring in. Try to find like the right guy that kind of emulates Penix a little bit. Again, you want to give him as many reps as possible to really achieve his ceiling here as a NFL quarterback. And I think the staff being in place is going to be key here. I wonder if Arthur Blank is going to pull the rug out from Terry Fontenot if the team doesn't make the playoffs. I figured he'll probably get like one more year beyond this. I feel that like just stability, a little bit more continuity is going to serve this team long term. And I think the fact that you pivoted to Penix now, you gave Cousins as much time as he needed to. It didn't work out. That's okay. That's life. There were certainly some good moments there under Kirk Cousins at quarterback, but it's the Michael Penix Jr. era now. So yeah, I think we're feeling okay. Love to see the team get its first winning season since 2017. That would also, that required beating the Panthers. More importantly, if you get that win, you got to hope that New Orleans rallies and beats Tampa Bay. It could happen. I mean, that's a rivalry game too in division. I mean, I think that's their secondary rivalry for each other. I think the Saints and Panthers isn't as much as like Falcons Bucks. So those are the tertiary ones. But yeah, the Gulf Coast teams here with Tampa and New Orleans, they really get after it. Maybe you get some sort of uplifting. The Saints are playing hard for the city office, obviously because of the senseless tragedy that happened on New Year's Eve, which delayed the Sugar Bowl, and that's why the show is coming on later. Again, I had to work late on Wednesday and then do false start again yesterday, so that's why I'm coming in today. I want to be fresh. I want to be thinking about Falcons football right now. My dog season's over. That's okay, and maybe the Falcon season's over and on Sunday, but I'd love to see them have an opportunity to have a home playoff game. So I've kind of got some thoughts about that. We're going to move on to our next topic here. We're going to move on to playoffs. You kidding me? So what are the chances that the Falcons make the playoffs here? Look, I'm not going to really belabor the point of playoff probability or anything like that. It's not great because it's not that you need the Falcons to beat the Panthers. I think that you're the favorite. You're at home. Falcons are going to play with a crashing sense of urgency. And again, they played with that versus Washington. They've been playing really hard since the Vegas game, if you will, New York, etc. So I don't have any problems thinking that the Falcons, won't hold up there in the bargain and beat the Panthers. But can you really trust the Saints to beat the Buccaneers? There's always the threat of Baker Mayfield probably throwing 3 or 4 picks in a game. We've seen the Buccaneers play with their food at times. We've seen Todd Bowles be a coordinator, not a head coach in that position. Obviously, that's something that we're concerned with Raheem Morris in some capacity. Maybe Darren Rizzi can get his team fired up, to play for the city of New Orleans and go out there and ball. But like the fact Derek Carr is not playing, the fact the Saints have kind of been, they've kind of been out of it since, October, have that 7-game losing streak that we let them end versus us. You got to trust the Saints, and anytime you want to do that, it just feels icky. You want to go take a shower, and even at that point, it's like taking a shower like out in like a more rural area where you have well water, or you have something where it's like the soft water, like out of my dad's place. It's like no matter how much you're in the shower, you feel like you're still dirty. You still feel like the soap and the shampoo and conditioner is still on you. So you got to look and see, is it still on you? Then it's like, oh, I don't know what's in my hair. That's what it's like rooting for the Saints. It's icky. I don't enjoy it. I don't think anybody enjoys it. No wonder why everybody in the division hates them. So probably beyond like the Cowboys, they're probably the most disliked team in the NFC for varying reasons here. But we really need their help. And honestly, for what's gone on in New Orleans, it'd be a great way for them to end their season with the win and putting us in the playoffs. So, like, maybe it can be a win-win for both. Obviously, my heart goes out to anybody that was affected by that tragedy, whether they were there for the Sugar Bowl or not. I mean, I've never been to New Orleans. I've always wanted to go. I've always wanted to do Bourbon Street. I love Cajun food. It's a big cultural city, in the Southeast in the United States. People go there to have a good time, and obviously stuff like this is, you're just like, man, what are we even doing in this society anymore? But yeah, I guess no really better way to turn the page here. But Atlanta's chances of making the playoffs hinge entirely on the Falcons taking care of business at home versus the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints upsetting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I would say you use that parlay, that two thing, maybe 12, 15% likely. I think Atlanta is probably favored to beat the Panthers. It's at home. Maybe give the Falcons a 60% chance of winning that game. Give the Saints maybe a 25% chance to beat the Buccaneers. 60% times 25, however probability works. I mean, I'm a writer. I don't do school anymore, but like that's what's at stake. It's not impossible, but I'm not counting on it. I think really, you go look back at certain points in the season, like, man, we swept the Buccaneers. We got that unbelievable win over the Eagles. You pants the Cowboys, but then you also have losses, like the Chargers one's the one that sticks to me. The Saints too, you split. This is your arch rival. This happens. This is the division. Nobody is really up in arms. You won the game you should have lost. You lost the game you should have won. The Seahawks game kind of got out of hand. Didn't show up at all for the Broncos game. The Vikings game was terrible. Steelers, and you lost a game where the other team didn't score an offensive touchdown. You played really close with the Chiefs. There's plenty of opportunities out there. It's like, man, we had it, and then we just didn't get it done. But there's other things out there to be happy about. This team has had certain moments where, like, okay, this is not the same old sorry Falcons team from yesteryear. It's trying to get out of that. Trying to be a better version of this team, trying to be a better version of yourself. It's a new year. Maybe it's not the same Falcons, but we'll see what happens. But I'll move on to the next topic here. Let's do some blow the whistle. So this is going to be fun. Is this season a failure if the Falcons do not make the playoffs? This is a really tough one, and I've kind of gone back and forth with it. I thought about it in the shower, like both sides of the coin here. But ultimately, I'm going to blow the whistle. Yes, it is a failure if they don't make the playoff. Because, look, if you say it's not a failure, then you're just making excuses for not getting it done. This is a team that entering the season, most prognosticators are saying the Falcons are going to be somewhere between a 7-10 team and a 12-5 team. They thought, okay, this is a very navigable schedule. It's tough at the beginning with the Steelers, the Eagles, and the Chiefs. You looked okay. You were 2-2 to start with the Saints win. Then it was supposed to even up, but then, teams that I was down on, like the Vikings, were incredible. The Broncos were really good. The Chargers are much improved. I thought the Commanders would be a very tough game, and it proved to be so. I thought the Raiders would be better. They're terrible. I knew the Giants were going to be bad. Didn't think they were going to be this bad. The Cowboys they were worse than I expected. You're sitting here and you're like, I think when we do like the circle of suck, like when they figure out like, okay, everybody beat everybody, like the Falcons beating the Eagles is going to ultimately be like the one where it's like, okay, that's where we slot in, and then we lost to some team that we shouldn't have. Maybe the Saints, if you will. I don't know how you basically figure it out. It's like the one loss the Chiefs had, that's where you start it, and then you kind of build it from there. But I feel like when it comes to this team, you're hoping that, enough changes, there was enough continuity with those changes. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but, like, you thought that, like, this team's upward trajectory, if it was firing on all cylinders, could get to that mark. I think the fact that the division was down, we knew that the Panthers were rebuilding. They're better now than they were at the start of the year, and I'll talk about that here in a second. You knew that the Buccaneers, were on top, but they were kind of vulnerable. And then the Saints, I kind of was down on them. I thought they'd be like a 7-10 team. A little worse than that. I did not expect them to go on a 7-game losing streak and really crap the bed. But you're kind of right where you are. I think it's like the schedule was tougher than I think we anticipated. So maybe if it was a little bit softer or not as the teams weren't as good, maybe you're 10-7 and maybe you're comfortably in. But at the same time, I mean, like, that stretch there when it was after the Cowboys game for Cousins, it was just pitiful. And in retrospect, maybe we should have made a change to Penix in that moment, but, like, you put so much investment into Cousins at that point. You owed it to your I don't know if you owed it to anybody, but, like, the finances said you got to play him for at least 3/4 of the season. And they made the change at the right time because you could have put him in there for the Raiders game, but I think Atlanta had a game plan. It's like, look, we're going to stop the bleeding here. We're playing on Monday night. We're playing, in a dome against a really bad team. If we just hone in defensively, I think we'll be okay. I think the thing with me is, really outside of the Giants game, there haven't been a lot this season where I'm like, Atlanta's doing everything right. It's easy to get right versus the Giants. I know at the start of the year, the defense was playing really well. Quarterback play was not quite there. Then the defense kind of started giving up some big scores, particularly versus the Seahawks, that was one that I remember distinctly. I don't know what the hell went wrong versus the Broncos. Quarterback play subsided. Obviously, we've seen Bijan Robinson take the leap up. I think he's a Pro Bowl games alternate. Yeah, congratulations to Chris Lindstrom and Kadarius Hodge for getting the nod. I didn't even think Lindstrom was, like, as good as he has been. I think it's just he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory there as a guard. He's sensational. Kadarius Hodge, didn't realize how great of a special teams player he was. I just going to remember him for making some great plays there. I think he really helped us out, beat the Saints the first time, and then obviously the Buccaneers game on Thursday Night Football. Yeah, that's a moment I'm going to be very happy about for Falcons or for a very long time. Because there's playoffs, and if Atlanta doesn't make it, some other guys will get Pro Bowl nods. It'll help them with their contracts. There's a lot of talent on this team. There wasn't, I didn't feel like this team was at a competitive disadvantage, 1-52 in a lot of instances. Maybe sometimes with Cousins, but not to the degree that you would think. I did feel, though, that the coaching let us down more often than not. Again, coaching matters. And, I say it all the time in college football when I'm doing that with Cody Williams. It's like, look, if your team's at a coaching disadvantage, it's a problem. And that kind of played out in the college football playoff. A lot of coaches who had more playoff experience, that helped them versus teams that did not. Obviously, Georgia and Notre Dame went a little bit differently because, Georgia's playing with a backup quarterback. Again, coaching's got to be superb at that point because you're dealing with a disadvantage there. But again, the one thing I'm just going to go back to and just say that it will be a failure if you don't make the playoffs. It's like, man, had opportunities here to really, really go get a great coaching staff. Maybe it'll be that. Raheem Morris seems to be a likable guy, seems to understand the city's ethos, and he's not trying to start new traditions here in Atlanta because he's been here for a while. But, man, sometimes I wonder, like, if we would have had, like, a Mike Vrabel type of head coach or Harbaugh, God, even Belichick, some guy who's, been around the block a few times as a seasoned head coach. I'm like, man, maybe we would have gotten that win there that, we otherwise wouldn't have had. That's really been the issue with the Falcons throughout their 50-plus years of existence. It's like I just always feel that the coaching lets us down. We've had good coordinators. We've had great players, but front office executives, whatever. We have a good owner in Arthur Blank now. I don't really know much about the Smiths back in the day, but, like, coaching needs to level up here. And I think Raheem Morris and his staff really need to take charge here. Learn from the mistakes, be accountable. And because the team's good enough to make the playoffs. And I don't know what's going to happen if this team doesn't make it this year and next. So yeah, it will be a failure. if they do not make the playoffs. So moving on to our fourth topic here, we're going to be about the ball. So yes, it all comes down to the Falcons hosting the Panthers, in week 18. This is I was on this vibe here with Carolina for a while. Again, I'm not looking at mostly the X's and O's here because this is a team that's already out of the playoffs versus a team that's fighting for its playoff life here in week 18. This is a big rivalry. I think the Panthers, again, the Panthers and the Falcons, it's 4 hours away. Just right up I-85 between Atlanta and Charlotte. When the Panthers hired Dave Canellis away from the Buccaneers, I'm like, oh, this is a great hire. This is one of my favorite ones of the offseason. I felt like for as tough of a job as that is, it's kind of like Kevin Stefanski going to the Browns. Like, I think he's going to be able to make it work. It goes back to Canellis being, helping, turn around, I think Geno Smith in Seattle initially as the quarterback's coach, and then helping turn around Baker Mayfield in Tampa. Benching Bryce Young very early in the season was a bit controversial. I mean, he's undersized. Team wasn't really going anywhere. Put Andy Dalton in there to kind of stop the bleeding a little bit. And I think when we played the Panthers the first time in Charlotte with Andy Dalton starting, I'm like, they weren't the Falcons were markedly better. I think they won by 10 points or something like that. But as I was watching that game from the Carolina perspective, I'm like, they're starting to figure it out a little bit. I think it's the offensive line was getting better. Chuba Hubbard's a great running back. I think it's just about, trying to find the right pieces to make this thing work. And I think the best thing that's happened to the Panthers is it seems as though David Tepper's finally decided to stop meddling. He's gotten away from, the disease that plagues professional sports owners with new owner syndrome, where it's I'm a billionaire hedge fund manager. I've been so successful in my ventures here, so I know everything. So I'm going to be able to know football. Well, maybe you don't. And I think it's cool that, you have a guy that wants to spend a lot of money, really elevate a franchise. Because again, there's only one of 32. There's only 32 of these. So anytime you get an opportunity to buy an NFL team and you have the money for it and you want to do it, just go for it. It's the same thing with the Broncos. When the Buhler family sold, the Walton Penners took over, and I don't know if the Waltons really care that much, but one of the Penners does, and that's I think that's the nephew of Sam Walton. I forget whatever his name is. The point is you want owners who care. You want people that are passionate about everything. But as soon as Tepper took his finger off of removed himself from the equation a little bit, put some more trust and faith into Dave Canellis, and particularly Panthers legend, former University of Miami star Dan Morgan as the GM perspective, you can finally see this happen. And I don't know how good Carolina is going to be next year. I think they might surprise some people. They're about an offseason away from really being able to make some noise in the league. Again, at the start of the year, everyone's like, oh, Carolina's going to be terrible. They're going to be the worst team in football. I didn't think so. I thought they'd be win about 4 or 5 games, which is what they've done. They don't need a quarterback. I think the pressure of moving on from Bryce Young is gone. I think that's a team. I think for me, that's a team that Abdul Carter goes to from Penn State. Anytime the Panthers have been good or great in their history, they've had some guy in the trenches or the front seven. You've had the late Samuels, the late Kevin Green, Julius Peppers, Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis. You've had unbelievable Hall of Fame caliber players in the front seven. And for a team that's only been around for about 25 years or so, maybe 30, closer to that now. Yeah, I think this is I think 30th is this season. It's pretty impressive. And but right now, the Falcons have more talent than them, and the Falcons have a greater sense of urgency here. That doesn't mean that the Falcons should take the Panthers lightly, because if you do that, you don't deserve to go to the playoffs. You need to beat the Panthers, you need to beat the snot out of them, and you need to hope that the Saints show up and they could mail it in. I don't know if Tampa is going to overlook the Saints, though. I think that's my concern, because they're not in yet, and neither is Atlanta. And there's only one spot left because, the Commanders got a wild card spot from us losing to them. Packers got one, beating the Saints 45-0. Yeah, it was pitiful. And then obviously the other wild card spot in the NFC is going to go to the loser of the last game of the season between the Lions and Vikings. Winner will get the 1 seed, the loser will get the 5 seed. So right now, Atlanta would be hoping to get the 4 seed. And at that point, you have a home playoff game versus the Lions or Vikings. And that may get ugly. That may get ugly really quickly. And people are gonna be like, I can't believe the Falcons have a home playoff game. I don't care, man. I want a home playoff game too. I was just there for the Peach Bowl. That environment was electric. That was the best playoff game we've seen so far this season. Nobody thought Arizona State had a chance versus Texas, and they took them to double overtime. And like this point spread was 13. Like if that's what happens here, and if the Falcons were to make the playoffs, I'd be great. I'm all about experience. I'm all about opportunities. This is a new year. This is a time for us to be appreciative, grateful, look internally, thinking like, okay, how can I be better than I was the previous 365 days? So I think these are two teams with the Falcons on the cusp of getting in and the Panthers trending up. Maybe the Buccaneers are pulled back a little bit, but they're sustaining excellence right now. The Saints got to totally rebuild right now. I can't believe that Gail Benson's going to give Mickey Loomis, for lack of a better word, just like he operates with no consequence. He kicked the can too far out. The bill came due. Again, there's a few things in my professional world that I do not care for. I do not care for people who get to operate without consequence. There should be consequences for if you do a good job or if you do a bad job in any profession. If you do a good job, you get a raise, you get a promotion, you get recognized, you get more opportunities. If you do a poor job, we know what comes with that. But more importantly, it holds everybody else back. So, beyond Mickey Loomis, I think Chris Ballard needs to go in Indianapolis yesterday. That guy, I don't know what he does. I don't know what Jim Irsay I don't know what he and Jim Irsay do. Like this, it's unbelievable. But right now, I feel comfortable saying that the Falcons are going to win by about they're going to win by like a score. I think I'm looking at a final score here of something like, what would it be? 31-27. That's kind of where I'm going right here. Atlanta will give up points, but I think at the end of the day, they're going to execute at a little bit higher of a level, particularly in the red zone. I think the team's going to be on it, on its P's and Q's after, Raheem Morris just completely brain farted the final minute of regulation on Sunday night. Maybe Riley Patterson makes like the kick we need. Maybe Bijan Robinson scores a touchdown. Maybe Pitts has another big play. This is all about confidence. I would love to see Penix have multiple touchdowns today. Finish the season with more touchdowns than picks. I think right now it's one touchdown and 2 picks. I would love for him to finish the season with a W. I'd love for this team to have a winning record because at this point, like Falcons are going to be picking somewhere in the 15 to 19 range, maybe 21 if you make the playoffs. Like, who cares? Like, we're not picking 8. And, we know that Terry Fontenot knows how to draft guys at number 8. But, maybe going back, maybe go get some guy on our defense, maybe get some guys that can, help this team really get to the top where they need it. So, again, I'm going to take the Falcons to win, 31-27. That's kind of where I'm at right now. So moving on to our penultimate topic here, let's keep talking about Michael Penix with some big Penix energy. So, what can we look forward to, being done question starter heading into 2025? I feel like we were kind of here before, not that long ago, with Desmond Ridder. Like, is Desmond Ridder going to be the guy? Do we know? Through his first 4 starts in 22 as a rookie, we're like, okay, he's playing ball control, kind of fits into what Arthur Smith wants to do offensively. There were moments there with Ridder where like, he's fun, but there were some times where it's like he's just throwing the ball over the place. Team went 7-10. Taylor Heineke played some. But with Penix, I'm like, this looks different. It's different in the sense what it was like when Mike Vick took over for Chris Chandler back in 2001, full-time in 2002. Look, not the same player at all. They both can really sling it. I feel Penix has a little bit more touch, but again, Vic didn't really have much. They both just like to gun it down the field with their howitzer of left arm. Penix doesn't move like Vic. Nobody else does. Vic is 1-of-1 in that regard. But I think the amount of starts and everything that we saw with Penix in college, both at Washington and Indiana, serve him here. I think being able to get him more first-team reps, I think getting him more comfortable with Zach Robinson's offense, that could be good. Anyway, excuse me. I always felt with Cousins like he worked really well in the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Kevin O'Connell offense here, Zach Robinson too. But like the McVay offshoot is very 11 personnel driven, whereas Shanahan likes to use a fullback. And I felt with Cousins like he he was not under center enough, not using play action to his advantage because, look, it's a lack of mobility to be able to sell a run. But then it's also like the lack of lower leg. He can't really drive the football like he did, so he's throwing some more ducks, getting more picks. It's a lose-lose operation. And you really want to roster a fullback in a situation where you'd rather have more wide receivers. I thought it was great that Ray McLeod played a ton this year. Obviously, not having Rondale Moore available really sucked. I think he would have made a big difference for us as well in the receiving game. But I really just go back to like Penix. I feel it's seen everything, whether, in the Big Ten, the Pac-12, now a little bit in the NFL as well. Didn't look like he's afraid of the moment. I'm looking forward to him really focusing on his footwork a little bit more, really becoming, a really polished passer, in the pocket. He can move around a little bit and everything like that, but I think you and I and everybody knows his future is being more precise. I don't know if you can really coach up accuracy here, but I think, getting on the same wavelength with your receiving core a little bit more. There were times there where like the ball's coming in hot and maybe the receivers weren't ready for it. Again, just having a little bit better chemistry with the receiving core is good. I mean, he's a guy he's recently engaged, really happy for him. This is a guy that I think everybody in the city and the fan base wants to see succeed, wants to see him be just an absolute stud, just a very likable guy. I was very fortunate that I got to interview him around a little bit over a year ago when he was playing the playoff for Washington. I think ahead of the Sugar Bowl that they beat Texas in. Quiet, didn't want to say too much, but he talks about. I think remember Kalen DeBoer was saying that like, yeah, he's just the best leader I've ever coached. He's the ultimate foxhole guy, and I think this is a guy that his peers along on offense, whether that would be Kyle Pitts, whether that would be Drake London, whether that would be Bijan Robinson, whether that would be Chris Lindsay, if you want to kick it out a little bit further, Matthew Bergeron there in the center, Drew Dahlman, a bunch of these guys, Caleb McGarry's a fellow UW guy as well. He's very easy to root for. And once the playbook gets a little more expansive, that'll be good. Again, we're going to be playing probably a second place schedule, maybe a first place schedule. So, yeah, I think offseason preparation is key. I think the fact that he can enter the offseason fully healthy, really work, get some throwing down, that'll be good. If he and Robinson progress in the way that I think that they can, and, I think if Raheem Morris brings in a little bit more help on the defensive side of the ball, I'm okay. I'm willing to let Jimmy Lake be the defensive coordinator for another year, but like you got to find a role for guys like Saleh and maybe anybody who's been like Nielsen, Saleh, Ulbrich, even Dennis Allen. His dad played for the Falcons on back in a good day. Like just a really good defensive mind, just to be in here as a consultant, maybe a glorified position coach, just somebody. I think that would really help because like we have the pieces in offense to do what we need to do. Defensively, we're still not quite there. And, I'll finish it up with talking about kind of some guys I think we need to put on this team, but I'm really excited to see Penix going forward. I feel like this is how I felt when we drafted Matt Ryan back in 2008. I knew how great he was at Boston College. I mean, Boston College is a good program, but under like Jeff Jagodzinski, I mean, he had them like number 2. He had them like winning in the Big East and the ACC. Again, I can never say this enough. That is the most underrated quarterback of my lifetime. Matt Ryan is incredible. Walking by his plaque on the Ring of Honor there on the 3rd level there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Wednesday, it really kind of reminded me. I'm like, we've had great players over the year, but like he's the best you ever had. I know Julio Jones is different. I know that like Deion Sanders as well, but like Matt Ryan belongs in Canton 1,000%. I don't know if Penix has that trajectory in him. I hope so, but like I think this is a guy that we can win multiple playoff games with going forward. Possibly this year. No, not this year. I'd be just happy to make it in, but like I'm hoping that Penix is the guy who unlocks all that potential we've just squandered since 2017. I'm really excited about this. So yeah, I'm just going to be working myself up into a lather with a whole bunch of offseason content around the Atlanta Falcons, just some more deeper stuff. And I'm really looking forward to that, bringing people on, not just Falcons fans or other teams, just people to kind of, have some dialogue about this team. We'll talk about other things in the NFL, plenty to talk about. That's how I like to consume the NFL. through a Falcons lens, but in a larger perspective as well. Figuring out where the bar is, figuring out who's on the come up, who's on the decline, how I should feel about this team versus how other people feel about their teams. It's all relative. You want to try to go into this as unbiased as possible, but we know it's not possible. This is the Blog and Dirty Podcast. This is about the Atlanta Falcons, and I love this team. I'll ride and die with this team forever. I don't care. I don't care if they don't win a Super Bowl in my life. They might, and they probably will. And I would hope to do that and share that with my kids one day. That'd be unbelievable. But, in the meantime, we got work to do. And moving on to our final topic of the day, we're going to go on to a slice of pumpkin pie. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about this. This is where I think I shine. I want to talk about the draft a little bit here. So I've got a handful of first-round talents here to target in the NFL draft. I looked through a handful of mocks. You're looking at the Falcons picking somewhere between 15 and 21, roughly, depending on how. Probably looking about 17s, where I've seen most mocks would have them, probably one of the last teams who don't make the playoffs. One of the best teams don't make the playoffs, in essence. So maybe just right around the top 16. So maybe just out of it. It seems as though everybody and the brother is once again saying, like, we got to go defensive front seven. I think I've seen them look for guys at defensive tackle, defensive end, linebacker. I've even seen a few in the secondary. And I've even seen tight end. And I'll go with this. I saw some mocks there with Colston Loveland, the star tight end from Michigan. Look, he's a great player. And I think he's going to be really good in a lot of teams. But Kyle Pitts is under contract next year. He's going to be playing out his fifth-year option. It seems as though Penix really likes him. And we've seen Pitts play a lot better since Penix has become the quarterback. So I'm willing to see that out for one more year. I don't know who's necessarily who's going to be the tight end of note in the 26th draft. Maybe you look there if Pitts doesn't work out. But right now, I don't think you can go tight end with a first round pick. Maybe go receiver. I don't know. I probably at that point I'm like, you got to reach on Tetairoa McMillan. I love him, but like he's going to be gone to like the Browns or something way too early. So I've got listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, magnificent 7 prospects that I think would look great in the red and black playing for the Falcons as the first round pick next year. Let's start with three guys I know very well. 3 guys off the Georgia team that just got eliminated from the playoffs, losing to Notre Dame. In the Sugar Bowl, big venture to guess that they're all probably going to declare. We'll see what happens here. Maybe some of these guys go back to school. I don't know. Let's start with the Butkus Award winner, Jalen Walker. Yes, interesting. He wasn't even like first team All-American or something like that in the SEC, but like he was the player at linebacker, kind of like outside linebacker, where in Georgia's best games this season, he was the most impactful. I mean, he was sensational in versus Texas both times. I think he was great versus Tennessee as well. He had that really boneheaded play. The offsides late in the game versus Notre Dame, but that game was kind of already decided. I'm not going to go as far as to say is like he's going to be as good as like Roquan Smith and Kobe Dane. Like we're coming out, they also won the Butkus Award, but I feel that Jalen Walker over this year, like there are moments where like there's a game where he just takes over. We saw that this year, particularly in the Falcons' first game with T.J. Watt. It's like, yeah. Probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year. He's unbelievable. I'm not saying that Jalen Walker is going to be that, but like there are moments that I saw him at Georgia versus some of the best competition in the SEC where it's like, oh, he's about that. He's going to make things happen. We're looking for guys who are disruptors, who are playmakers. We have a guy like that in our defense. His name is Jesse Bates III at safety. There's just not enough of that. Grady Jarrett's great. Doesn't quite do that. Matthew Judon had a few plays this year, but not as much as it was. Same with Justin Simmons. AJ Terrell's more of a tactician back there. We saw, Caden Ellis start making some plays. It'll be interesting to see what Braylon Trice does in his first season after injury. But like until the Falcons like figure it out in the front seven or defensively, you just got to go. Just go. Just draft heavily there because like it seems like with Terry Fontenot, he's basically prioritized, offense and he's the 4 guys he's drafted, with Pitts, with London, with Robinson, and now Penix. You're like, oh, there's some special there. It's not always great. I know people are detracted against Pitts for a lot, but like it's getting better. I'm willing to give him another shot. Everybody else is like, oh, this is good. We haven't really whiffed on any first round picks, really. I mean, in a while. Like Terrell is good, McGarry's been playing well, Lidstrom's fantastic. It's even if you go back to like what Calvin Ridley, I mean he was good there for a while. It's been a minute since the Falcons have really whiffed on their first round pick. So I trust the front office to be able to make a right selection, even if it's not popular. But Jalen Walker is a guy that I think would be fantastic. Let's move on to another guy coming off the edge, another guy who I really think would be good. That would be Michael Williams. You're looking at him coming off the board a little bit before Jalen Walker, the last guy I mentioned here. Michael Williams is looking like a guy who's going to be drafted somewhere in the 7 to 12 range. That's going to be a little bit before the Falcons are picking. I don't know if you want to trade up for him. He was dealing with some injuries there. I think he was making a lot of plays in that Clemson game for Georgia. Obviously, Phil Maffa kind of ran into him, kind of slowed him down a little bit. But Michael Williams, really good coming off the edge. Probably not as versatile as much as like Jalen Walker is, but a sensational player. Every bit the 5-star. Certainly a guy that like I feel could be an immediate impact player wherever he goes. I feel he's going to be very highly coveted. I think he's going to test out off the roof in the combine. He was probably one of the better reasons. Georgia's best attribute this year was this was not the best Georgia team, but they were really, really good in the pass rush in the front seven. I thought that Michael Williams, when he was healthy, really took that defense next level. Maybe a few concerns about that there with him, but for the most part, like, yeah, he's good to go. I think a lot of him. And then finally, the third Georgia player I want to talk about is safety Malachi Starks. Again, this really comes down to is if Justin Simmons is returning. And Malachi Starks, an immensely talented defensive back for Georgia. Again, like there were moments there, not necessarily like Keely Ringo, where it's like made a lot of really great plays there as an underclassman, and then kind of had some brain farts there in the second half of his college career. But Malachi Starks, he kind of feels like he's in between Simmons and Bates. He's got a knack for the football, a great playmaker, sees the field well. I think he's playing, alongside Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell. Like it'll really help him out there too. But again, this is all contingent on if Justin Simmons isn't back. It's going to come down to money. I would be happy with having Malachi Starks, but again, you're wondering how impactful a safety is going to be. So I think those are the three guys right now for Georgia that I feel are first round locks are right about there. Definitely Michael Williams, definitely Jalen Walker, and probably Malachi Starks. I think that those are three players that I think the Falcons would be foolish to not scout heavily. I think that Kirby Smart will give it to him straight, and maybe one of them ends up playing for the Dirty Birds. Going to stay in the SEC for the next two. Let's go with Tennessee edge rusher James Pierce Jr. The SEC was down this year. There was only 3 teams that made the playoff, and one of them was Tennessee. One of the things that Tennessee did really well, again, Georgia, Texas, Tennessee all made the playoffs because they were all fantastic in the pass rush in the front seven. Tennessee had some issues with Nico Iamaleava at quarterback. Obviously, Josh Heupel's offense is kind of gimmicky, doesn't translate to the NFL. Really good defensive minds can expose it. Jim Knowles ate his lunch there in the first-round game at Columbus versus Ohio State. James Pierce Jr. was a guy entering the year where it was like, oh, he's a top 5 pick. And he still might be. But again, like I feel that there's been other guys who have emerged. I think, the guys like Jalen Walker and Michael Williams have really come on and been able to, really take some of the shine off of him. But yeah, he played for a fantastic defensive coordinator there in Knoxville and Tim Banks. Tennessee was a lot of fun to watch and cover this year. They were a little bit flawed, but that's a team that I think if Nico steps up, like they're going to be a lot better. I'll be honest with you. I feel more confident about Tennessee making the playoff next year versus Georgia. I think the SEC is more likely to get 4 in versus 3. So Tennessee is definitely a program trending up. But yeah, obviously losing James Pierce Jr. to the NFL is going to hurt their defense a little bit. But he's right in the wheelhouse where I think the Falcons would be picking. Again, there's a lot of other edge rushers and defensive linemen out there that I think could make a huge impact, and he's certainly one of them. He's a guy that I'm going to monitor very closely. And then 3 more here. The last guy from the SEC. Let's go with Texas A&M edge Nick Scourton. He played his first 2 years at Purdue, and then he came over to A&M. So he's played for 3 different coaches. He's played for He's played for Jeff Brom in his final year in West Lafayette. He played for Ryan Walters. Didn't like that. Got out of Dodge. Ryan Walters was so over his skis as a Power 4 head coach. And then he links up with a really good head coach in college football and Mike Elko, following him to A&M or joining up with him at A&M. Texas A&M is another program that I feel like they're looking like a playoff caliber team next year. Got to see Marcel Reed improve at quarterback. Obviously Connor Wegman's transferred to Houston. Maybe he's going to help out Willie Fritz a little bit, but Nick Scourton's a guy that I think, like, if the Falcons are closer to 21 than 15, maybe he's the guy there. But again, A&M's produced a lot of really great defensive players, a lot of really fast, explosive guys over the years, a lot of athletes there. Guys usually come in the league ready to play. Again, you think of A&M, you're like, oh my God, is he going to be like Myles Garrett? Well, that's one of one. But I think Nick Scourton's a player that could potentially fit into Jimmy Lake's scheme and whatnot. Again, I would be very shocked if the Falcons do not go defense. And the last two guys are going to be on defense. Let's go with the other guy in the Michigan defensive line. Let's go with Kenneth Grant. Look, Mason Graham is a stud. Mason Graham is incredible. More of a defensive tackle. Kenneth Grant's a little bit further out. Mason Graham is going to be off the board before Atlanta's picking. I think he's going to go playing somewhere like Cleveland, maybe the Jags, something like that. Mason Graham has the potential to kind of be the next, like, Fletcher Cox, Aaron Donald, Grady Jarrett, if you will, like that kind of a player. Chris Jones. Kenneth Grant, I don't know exactly what he could be. Maybe he's like Jadeveon Clowney, like a guy who's a really, maybe not the physical freak that Clowney was coming out, but like a really high-end number 2 if he's playing next to an all-world number 1, like a guy who will make Pro Bowls. Maybe the stats don't necessarily show up. But he's a player that I feel like will set up other players on his team for success. I don't necessarily feel that he's as much of a freelancer as Jadeveon Clowney was and Ndamukong Suh was during his prime. But Grant was a huge part of Michigan being, playoff caliber last year and the year prior to that. And then obviously Michigan was going through transition with Harbaugh taking over there in Los Angeles and Sherrod Moore coming over. But the best part of Michigan's team was their defensive line because of Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. And Will Johnson was fantastic in the secondary, but throughout Michigan looked really good in the trenches. And I think that if you can succeed, in the Big Ten against some of the best competition in college football, Power 2, whatnot, like, it's going to translate. So Kenneth Grant would be a great pickup. And finally, a guy I'm going to go back out in secondary, hurt now, Notre Dame quarterback Benjamin Morrison. I get a lot of crow for Georgia losing to, it's been going for a while when the coffee pot turns off. That's how it goes here. But Notre Dame really impressed me under Marcus Freeman. There's a cool factor to them that they never had under Brian Kelly. I think the fact that Marcus Freeman's former linebacker, played at Ohio State, really helps them. And we know a lot about Xavier Watts and what he can do. He's a special player. Again, a guy that I don't think is going to be a first-round pick, but like could be a star in this league, like Jesse Bates. He's got a tremendous nose for the football. Benjamin Morrison didn't play in the Sugar Bowl. He's hurt. He's banged up a little bit. But I feel anytime Notre Dame's got like a guy who's speedy, like really good out on the perimeter, that's huge. I think it was a Kyle Hamilton coming out, starting now with the Ravens, played at Marist right by where I live in Atlanta. Benjamin Morrison, I think anytime you've got a player like that you think like, okay, he could go play somewhere that it's more like Texas or Florida or LSU programs, Georgia, if you will, that are really well known, Ohio State, for their defensive backs. It catches my attention. Again, I think the injury stuff may knock him down a peg a little bit, but if the Falcons were to make the playoffs and be picking somewhere around 20, I mean, maybe he's the guy to go pursue there. I think there's a little bit of high risk, high reward there, but I think of the fact that Terry Fonda is a former defensive back himself, played at Tulane. I think that helps him identify, know what to look for as well. Raheem Morris, again, I think that's the side of the ball. I think that's his position now that I think about it. Yeah, I think he's a secondary coach because, Dan Quinn, defensive line. I think they were, I think he was his coach on Hofstra or whatever. But yeah, I feel like I would trust the Falcons to kind of look a little bit more in the secondary and hit there than they do, in the trenches. But again, like, we got to keep going there. Who knows if Matthew Judon will be back? Who knows what Bradley Trice will be off of injury? who knows what the future of Arnold McKinney is going to be. But like, you need to basically pursue some sort of player to help amplify your defense. I may come around. There may be things like in the draft, like, okay, maybe you go receiver. Okay, maybe it's over with Pitts. Maybe you go with a tight end. Maybe you go offensive line in some capacity. But right now, you got to find a stud playmaker to help you at any of the three levels of your defense, probably closer to the front to really impact the line of scrimmage. I think I would be pretty mad if two of the Atlanta Falcons' first three picks are not on defense. Offense is looking good. Maybe you can amplify that within free agency. Again, you're going to be eating a lot of dead cap with Kirk Cousins, but like, who cares? Penix is under contract. You're not paying him a ton. It'll work out all right. So yeah, that's kind of who I'm looking for here with, Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, Malachi Starks out of Georgia, James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, Nick Scourtown out of A&M, Kenneth Grant out of Michigan, and Benjamin Morrison here out of Notre Dame. So yeah, that was fun. Kind of talk some draft stuff here. I really enjoyed that. Hope you guys did too. But yeah, this was the Blog and Dirty podcast. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. You can read all of my work on fanside.com. Again, I cover college football and the NFL on a national basis. I also write a lot about the Atlanta Braves. That's kind of my wheelhouse here. Read any work you want on fanside.com. Be sure to read all the work on Blog and Dirty if you want a little bit more in-depth Falcons coverage. These guys do great work over there. You can follow the show. You go to fanside.com. Blog and Dirty. If you want to follow the show on YouTube, it's at Blog and Dirty FS. Started to really kind of grow this thing here. I'm looking forward to having a longer runway heading into the season. I know this was started doing this probably like very late July, but like having a full off season, having draft, having opportunities to engage and communicate with everybody here in Dirty Bird Nation. That's what I love. I love the games, but I love the gossip. I love all this other stuff as well. Again, we're going to have fun, interesting guests on all off season long. I love having a co-host on False Start. I also like going solo here, just being able to talk to myself for like 50 minutes on end about football. I'm very blessed to be able to do this for a living, and I'm very blessed to have you guys here as part of Dirty Bird Nation here, Blog and Dirty Bird Nation. There you go. Maybe that's what I call you guys here, but yeah. This is we're going to be having another show probably Wednesday next week. I'll have Ian McMillan of SI on. Really excited about that. Cody Williams will be on the following week and probably be in the heart of the offseason. So yeah, hopefully the Falcons get a win here on Sunday. Hopefully the Buccaneers lose, but that means the Saints win. But whatever it takes to get in the playoffs. Once again, thanks for listening. And this was the Blog and Dirty Podcast.